International Silver Company presents Silver Theater. Starring Marguerite Chapman and Helmut Dantine in The Gilded Pheasant. Presented to you this week in behalf of those two great names in silverware, International Sterling, world-famous solid silver, and 1847 Rogers Brothers, America's finest silver plate. And here is the director of Silver Theater, Conrad Nagel.
Thank you, Vern Smith, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our play tonight is The Gilded Pheasant by the celebrated writer Stephen Morehouse Avery and has been adapted for us by Nat Wolfe. Our stars are Marguerite Chapman and Helmut Dantine. Now, the house lights dim and the silver curtain rises on The Gilded Pheasant, with Marguerite Chapman as Marion and the Warner Brothers star Helmut Dantine as Pietro, with Dennis Green as the Englishman. With your permission, I'm going to introduce you to the man who can tell you this story, because after all, he was the only man who saw the end of it. I don't mean to sound mysterious, but I'm a fellow who believes that names are unimportant, so I'll just introduce him to you as the Englishman.
Thank you, Mr. Nagel, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I tell you the story of The Gilded Pheasant, I must disagree ever so slightly with Mr. Nagel. I'm a fellow who believes that names are of the utmost importance, and so I must warn you that I've changed all the names of the people concerned in this tale. The only name that's left is the true name of the inn, The Gilded Pheasant, or in the language of the country, the Pheasant doré in the city of Tours in France. This is a story of those days when Europe was still a place for carefree, happy hours spent roaming its countryside and tasting of its vineyards. Days which we now hope and pray have a chance of being again. But forgive me, I mustn't digress. On the continent somewhere, in a forgotten little cobbled street, where the rain is drawing fine black lines across the yellow glow of a corner lamp, a man is peering into the faces of passers-by, or later at a table in a tiny dark place. He will look up from his duck and Madeira and start as though he's seen a ghost. Now, you'll wonder why he does this, and so I will tell you the story. I will call this man Forrest Windsor, who at 39, with excellent business judgment, had broken his way through Wall Street to a useful fortune. The only wildcat plunge he'd ever taken in his life had been a sudden marriage at 36. Quite frankly, he needed a woman, a wife, and all he found in 3 long years of marriage was a doll's face with a wistful half-smile on her lips and a vague wonder-what-it's-all-about look in her gray eyes. He could find no basis for human companionship or conversation, so at last he found instead a psychiatrist in a desperate attempt to solve his problem.
So you see, Doctor, what I'm up against.
Yes, Mr. Forrest, I believe I do.
Here's a woman who is utterly devoted to her home and my welfare. Not a single thing for my comfort is too much for her to do. Yet her real self seems always to elude me.
These things happen, Mr. Windsor. They're not unusual. How is her health?
Superb. I'm convinced that her ailments are entirely imaginary.
Have you tried to discuss things in which she is interested?
I can't find anything she is interested in.
Clothes, perhaps.
Marion's clothes are perfect, and she looks perfect in them. But she doesn't talk about them.
Does she listen to you when you talk of your own affairs?
She listens to me whenever I talk, about everything. But she never answers. A monosyllable is an eloquent speech from Marion. I don't know how to express it, but she seems to be living in the past. She has no interest in what's going on today.
In that case, Mr. Windsor, I would suggest that you try to recapture some of the past for her. Has she done any traveling?
Oh, yes. She's traveled all over the world. Lived for quite a few years on the continent.
Good. Then I'd like to suggest this. Take her abroad. Go to Europe and find as many familiar places as you can. It's just possible that this will rekindle a spark of interest or help to lay the ghost of something that might be haunting her. I think you should try that, Mr. Windsor, and at once.
I need to change more than she does. I'll take your advice, Doctor, but I think I'll make the trip alone. Hello, Marion. Sorry I'm so late.
It's quite all right, Forrest. You must be tired.
I'm not at all tired.
Did you have a hard day at the office?
Unusual day. Was there any mail?
No.
I'd like to make some plans for tomorrow.
Plans?
Yes. It's your birthday. Remember?
Oh, yes.
You know the emerald ring, Marion? The one that was your last birthday present? Supposing I matched it with a bracelet for this birthday.
That would be very nice.
You think you'd like it?
If you would, Forrest, then I would like it very much.
Good. That's settled then. Now, how about dining out tomorrow night?
If you wish.
Where we go? Colony? Lido? 21?
Anywhere.
Good grief, Marion. Can't you ever have an idea of your own?
It sounds like a very nice plan, dear.
Look, maybe we both need a change. I think we'd better get out of here for a while. Or at least I'd better get out. I think I'd like to go to Europe for 6 months.
I think a change might be good for me, too.
I don't really think you're well enough to go. And besides that, Europe's an old story to you anyway.
Forrest, I'll go with you.
When Forrest Windsor told me something of his story, he said that sitting next to Marion on the deck of a luxury liner, he found that up to now at least, there was very little difference between 3 years of it at home and 3 days of it at sea.
Warm enough?
Yes, thank you.
How about a little swim before lunch?
No, thank you, Forrest. I think I'll just stay here on deck.
It's lovely, isn't it? We're due at Algiers tomorrow morning. Would you like to go ashore?
If you would, Forrest.
At least that'll relieve the monotony. Well, I think I'll have a swim if you don't mind.
Yes. Why don't you?
Sure you won't come?
No, I'll just stay here.
And think.
And think.
How about that bracelet?
It's very pretty.
Very much like Algiers. Would you like it?
Do you like it, Forrest?
I like it very much, but you're the one who has to wear it. Oh, for heaven's sake, do you want it or not? I have a car waiting for us. I thought it might be pleasant to drive to Paris.
That sounds lovely.
If we feel like it, we can stop off on the way. You know this country like a book. If you have any suggestions.
No. It sounds as though you've planned it beautifully.
Isn't there some place we might stop on the way through?
Tours is attractive.
Great Caesar, I'm a success. A suggestion. And from you. We stop at Tours.
So, Tours it was. But to Forrest Windsor, the atmosphere was disturbingly like that on Central Park West in the city of New York. Even Europe wasn't enough of a change. They went for a drive one day in Tours just to relieve the monotony. And as their horse-drawn carriage rolled along the Rue Nationale, their accustomed silence lay heavily between them. Marion, calm, beautiful, and composed.
Shall we go back to the hotel, Marion?
What? I'm sorry, dear. I didn't hear you.
I said, shall we go back to the hotel, or what about the Universe, the Lyonnais, for dinner?
They're both very good for us.
It's very kind of you to agree. I thought at least you knew France, Marion, but you really have a tourist's mind.
All right, then. We won't dine at any of those places. Tell the driver to go to the Pheasant.
Pheasant Doré, the gilded pheasant. It was there that night that I saw Marion Windsor for the first time. My friend and I, you'll forgive me if I don't tell you his name, even though he was born a Prince Royal. He permitted himself to be called Pietro, which is as good a name as any. As I was saying, we were drinking in that old room. It was a place where suddenly, in a small stone-flagged courtyard, one found himself completely out of his own century. Inside the parlor breathed a faint musk, as if it had just been opened after a few hundred years. A cavalier grinned from a golden frame, and the crimson brocade before the windows looked brittle enough to break at a touch. The dining room was long and narrow and not large. There were mirrors reflecting here and there, an unbelievable somberness of red and gold. There were a few French people, as ancient as the place itself. At our table, my friend was sitting, facing the wall mirror in front of him, in which was reflected the rest of the room with all its occupants. When Windsor and his wife entered, they were shown directly to the table behind us. Facing her as I was, I remember wondering immediately what it was that was so arresting about her.
Bonsoir, monsieur.
Good evening. A vermouth, please. Marion, what do you have?
Madame me prefer vin blanc au citron.
Marion, did you hear?
Yes, dear, I heard. I think the vermouth, please.
Very good, madame.
What is this, anyway? An old man's home? Even the waiters are 90.
It's a very old place.
Gives me the creeps. You've been here before, haven't you?
Yes.
Why didn't you say, let's go to the Gilded Pheasant? I used to love it when I was here before.
I had no idea you might like it.
I don't like it. But I'm perfectly willing to do some things once in a while that you might like. If you'd let me know what they are. Does the conversation at the next table interest you as much as it does me?
What did you say, Forrest?
But their real genius is their women. No others have so much to offer a man.
Your enthusiasm about Americans almost suggests a personal experience.
Perhaps you will take me seriously when I tell you that I count all other experiences as nothing. The prince is made of the same flesh and blood as the rest of you.
Now, don't dangle a skeleton in front of me, Pietro. Tell me the story.
It happened some years ago. My father's entourage was on the way to Biarritz by motor. There is a little place on the coast, just into France, called Cristobal-sur-Mer. It is sort of a white toy city with a miniature square, a hotel, tiny tram cars, a theater, and the whole set before a bright strip of sand against a background of pine-covered dunes. The little promenades are bright with resplendent uniforms of generals and the parasols of ladies. Our party went straight on, but I remained behind. The Cristobal fascinated me. One day, while my chauffeur was seeking in a shop for my particular preference in cigarettes, I decided to walk around the square, and when I returned, sitting in the back seat of my car, as though she owned it, and the whole of the world as well, was the lady of whom I shall tell you.
Why do you look at me like that?
May I drive you somewhere, mademoiselle?
To the police, monsieur. Or more appropriately, to the Museum of Art, where such presumption as yours may be enshrined upon a pedestal.
But I have no desire to disorganize the local police or to put the art museum into shadow by your presence.
In that case, my advice to you is to get out of Colonel Brackett's car.
Oh, mademoiselle, it is just possible that the military gentleman of whom you speak has not the only car of this kind in all of Europe. You know, this could be my car.
It could be, but it isn't. I must ask you to leave in at once.
It was right. It was not my car. It was Colonel Brackett's.
And who was the lady?
Who is not important. I have much more to tell you of her. Will it not do if I say that she was the loveliest woman in the entire world? Why do you laugh?
My dear Pietro, I'm laughing at you in such a romantic role. I've always thought it was the one role you avoided.
Call it romance if you must. I shall call it fate.
Well, your fate has now ordered you out of the car. Did you get out?
At the moment, I was too concerned with hair that was black and red and golden in a dozen lights, and with eyes that were not the eyes of my countrywomen. But I told you she was lovely.
Yes, I believe you did.
Well, that was not all. At the moment, a group of gay young English people appeared, and as they clambered into the car, she introduced me to them with a Spanish name. She said, is Don Pietro Bomeros dos Sanchez. To my utter consternation and to my supreme pleasure, I was whisked high up into the dunes to the villa of Colonel Brackett, where for the next 2 days I was in the most confusing paradise that I had ever imagined. I shall never forget those 2 days. They were the beginning for Beatrice and me. May I call her Beatrice? It was not her name any more than Pietro was mine, though she called me that to the end. I hope in some reincarnation I shall be Pietro, and she will be there.
Marion, you haven't eaten a thing. You've been listening as hard as I have. Does that story interest you so much?
Don't you think we'd better go now, Forrest?
Wait. I must say I'd like to hear the end of it, if it has an end. Let's have some more coffee.
Very well.
Yeah, he's starting again.
And though you do not believe in, I will tell you more. But that first evening, in a little lattice-enclosed rose garden behind Brackett's villa, she put a white rose in my buttonhole and asked,
Pietro, what comic opera troupe did you run away from?
"Oh, it was a very obscure one."
Why? Wouldn't they let you wear a sword?
No. And besides, I couldn't play the kind of parts I wanted to.
What did you want to play?
Sometimes just the part of a man.
And what were you playing?
I was playing the part of a prince, but I didn't like it, Beatrice.
I can understand that. All the princes I've ever known have been pretty dull.
Sometimes a prince doesn't want to be dull. Sometimes it's forced on him.
How would you know? Is that what they told you in the comic opera?
Yes, Beatrice, that is what they told me. They told me more than that, because it seems they expected a great deal from me. They expected a great many things. I wish you would let me tell you some of them.
Not now, Pietro. Not now, please. Another time. If there ever is another time.
There had to be another time. I couldn't have stood it without seeing her again. But now, I had something to tell them, my family, and my country. I knew I couldn't face Beatrice again until I did what I knew I had to do. I looked at the frantic wires from my family in Biarritz, and it was then when I sat down and wrote to them, and to the little Dutch princess for whom I had been destined since I was 10 years old. Such things, my friend, are arranged when one is born a prince and not permitted to be a man. Beatrice, by her very existence, had changed all of this, because now I could not marry that little Dutch princess, no matter what my destiny. I sealed the letters and went searching for Beatrice. We drove that day far up into the dunes for luncheon, and afterward I dismissed the car so that we could walk back. As we walked, we looked over that shining white Cristobal, over the blue bay with its faint reflection of the purple shadow of the Pyrenees. Beatrice had taken off her hat, and the wind was in her hair.
Let's not talk, Pietro. It's so beautiful just being here.
But I can't help it, my darling. I must tell you how much I love you, more than life itself.
You don't have to say it. I knew it. We've loved each other from the very first moment.
But there are things I have to tell you, Beatrice.
Don't. Don't tell me anything. I know who and what you are. I've known it from the beginning, from the very first day. But if it's true that nothing can come of all this later, what does that matter now?
I love you more for that. I love your understanding. I love your compassion.
I love you.
It is not true that nothing can come of this. That is what I want to tell you, Beatrice. There is not a kingdom in the world worth our happiness. I've renounced my heritage.
No, Peter. A whole people in 500 years forbid you.
I know. But I've done it.
I won't let you. You have a duty to a people, Pietro. You must go on as you're destined to go on, content with your duty, and with my everlasting love. And now, I want you to go away.
My darling, you must listen to me. You forget that from the day that I was brought into this world, every move I've made has been planned for me by others. I've never known what it was to waken in the morning, stretch out my arms, and know that I was free. My life, Beatrice, has been the timetable of a royal railway. I've been held aloof from a world that I might have loved, to be the symbol of my father's people. I could have borne this, my darling, if I had never met you.
I know, and I love you very dearly. But I cannot accept the responsibility of betraying a people, nor will I let you. I'm just as strong as that Pietro. But I'm not strong enough to bear it if you're with me. You're going to leave me now. I can't stand it if you don't. Goodbye, my dear.
I
don't know how I lived through the next few months. If she couldn't bear to have me with her, I couldn't bear to be away. I followed her from one end of the continent to the other, until one night I found her here in Tours. We came to the Pheasant that night, and we made a bargain. It was a hard bargain for me, but I could see that she could not go on as it was any more than I. So I promised not to seek her for 5 years. 5 years. You know what that has done to kingdoms. I'm no longer Prince Royal. My father's people have done away with kings. Their most ardent Republican rejoices in it no more than I do. But they have cheated me out of something more precious than a dozen thrones. I've lost her somewhere. She may have married. Anything might have happened. And it only remains for me to tell her that I was a fool. A fool to balance the rest of the world against an hour with her.
You agreed not to seek her for 5 years. What was her agreement?
That at the end of 5 years to the night, she would meet me here at the Gilded Pheasant. This is the night, and I'm waiting.
But you'd hardly expect her to follow you here into the dining room. Don't you think that perhaps she would prefer to wait for you outside?
You're quite right, my friend. If you will excuse me, I will see if she is outside.
Of course.
What a story. What a romance. He looks like a prince, that man. And incidentally, what a woman. Even losing her, he's a luckier man than most I know.
Yes. Don't you think we should go now, Forrest?
Go. I won't move an inch. I want to get a look at a glorious creature like that.
I really must go, Forrest. When you're ready, I think we ought to start. If we are going to continue our journey together.
At least wait until I've had a chance just to see such a woman once, Marion. Well, good Lord, aren't you interested in anything?
If you'll excuse me, Forrest, I really must go.
Okay. I won't be long. Waiter.
Oui, monsieur.
Brandy, please.
Tout de suite, monsieur.
I beg your pardon, sir. Might I have one of your cigarettes?
Certainly. Here you are.
Thank you.
Light?
Thanks.
I guess it's the privilege of friends and wives to keep one waiting indefinitely. About time they came back, don't you think?
Do you see that wall mirror behind your back, sir? And the one opposite you that faces you?
Yes.
They're very clear and very revealing. Do you think my friend was telling that story to me? No, my dear sir. He was telling that story to a pair of gray eyes. They were in that mirror behind you, sir, directly behind you. No, I don't think it's time they came back. I don't think they'll ever come back. So, on the continent somewhere, now here, now there, in a little cobbled street in the rain, Forrest Windsor is searching for them. He does not wish to separate or trouble them, but he needs her absolution. He was married to a priceless woman. He loved her dearly, but he never found the time nor the heart to learn to understand her. And that, if there is one, must be the unpardonable sin.
And so the curtain falls on The Gilded Pheasant, starring Marguerite Chapman and Helmut Dantine, with Dennis Green, Gain Whitman, and Pedro de Cordova. Now, here is Conrad Nagel.
The play's the thing, said Shakespeare. Well, you've had the play. The curtain's down, the player's gone. Suppose we spend a moment now with something bigger than the play. The thought of freedom. That commodity which men in every age have died to keep. That dream that's always on the brink of being lost or won. That need within which gave this country birth. I don't suppose there's one of you who hasn't heard a score of times or more the famous tale how on a moonlit April night in 75, a horse and rider stood beside the river's edge, waiting the signal that would send them flying over the cobbled street and dusty road, spreading the word from Charleston to Lexington.
To arms! To arms! The redcoats are coming!
You'd think the man who made that fearless midnight ride, who roused the countryside to wake and fight, must be, by nature, militant. Adventurer, perhaps, crusader, even politician. In fact, he was a silversmith. How could he leave that gentle craft, lay down those tools of peace for those of war? A man of peace feels freedom's need as strong as any Hotspur. And men of peace today as then will take up tools of war. Remember in your paper back a month ago the story that the headlines screamed so black and bold?
Airplane city of Nagoya devastated by new firebombs.
Superports leave deadly new calling cards.
Deadly they were, but made by men of peace. A new terror for the little yellow men who thought they were masters of terror. Bombs filled with jellied gasoline. Bombs that came down, down, down with their directional cloth streamers trailing out behind like the tails of hundreds of kites. Bombs that crashed easily through factory roofs, that exploded inside. Bombs that released their clinging, flaming, searing fuel in all directions. So everything they touched was hopelessly ignited. Walls, floor, machines, window frames. Everything they touched in Nagoya that June day was hopelessly ignited. Yes, men of peace can fight. School teachers and shopkeepers, farmers and businessmen, silversmiths can fight. When not with guns and tanks, with hammers and saws, with furnaces, conveyors, drilling machines, as international silversmiths are fighting now. Those jellied gasoline bombs were made by International. Also the magnesium incendiaries which fired Tokyo, radar assemblies, rifle parts, ammunition clips. The shops of International are humming with the machinery of war, as are hundreds of thousands of other shops in the land. And behind the machines, behind the conveyor belt, beside the assembly line, in front of the furnaces, stand the silversmiths, the shopkeepers, the farmers, the businessmen. Let's remember those simple men of peace, whose spirit in time of war so wholeheartedly works with our Army and Navy in our fight for freedom. Marguerite Chapman appeared tonight on Silver Theater through the courtesy of Columbia Pictures and is soon to be seen playing the lead opposite Fred McMurray in Columbia release Pardon My Past. Helmut Dantine may currently be seen in the Warner Brothers production Escape in the Desert. Next week, Silver Theater will present a delightful comedy written especially for us by David Victor and Herbert Little, entitled A Charmed Life. Our stars will be radio's first lady of comedy, Joan Davis, and Harry Von Zell. So until next week, then, may I leave you with this reminder.
The two great names in silverware are International Sterling, world-famous solid silver, and 1847 Rogers Brothers, America's finest silver plate. The music on this program was composed and conducted by Felix Mills. This is Vern Smith speaking for the International Silver Company. All names and designations of persons and organizations used on the dramatic portions of this broadcast are fictional. Silver Theater originates at Columbia Square in Hollywood. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.